Hello, my name is Allison Hewitt and I am a Public Policy Fellow for the California Department of Education. This presentation will provide guidance around evidence-based interventions under the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA. Here are the objectives for this presentation. At the end of the presentation, you will be able to define evidence-based interventions, and identify the 4 tiers of evidence as defined by ESSA, and explain the differences between them. The Elementary and Secondary Education Act has consistently directed educators to implement interventions grounded in research. Under No Child Left Behind, schools and districts were called to rely on scientifically based research. This has been replaced by evidence-based interventions under ESSA. This shift was designed to help increase the impact of educational investments by ensuring that the interventions that schools, districts, and states implement are as effective as possible at leading to their desired outcomes, namely increasing student achievement. There is a general call to prioritize evidence-based interventions, strategies, and approaches throughout ESSA. Programs across Titles 1, 2, 3, and 4 should include evidence-based interventions. Title I school improvement programs under Section 1003 only require a higher degree of evidence, represented by Tiers 1 through 3, while other Title I and Title II through 4 program requirements can be met using a less rigorous standard, represented by Tier 4. What are evidence-based interventions? Evidence-based interventions are practices, strategies, or programs that have proven to be effective in leading to a particular outcome. In other words, these activities have definitive evidence to show that they produce results when implemented. There are 4 tiers of evidence under ESSA. Tier 1, strong evidence, defined as being supported by 1 or more experimental studies. Tier 2, moderate evidence, defined as being supported by 1 or more quasi-experimental studies. Tier 3, promising evidence, defined as being supported by 1 or more correlational studies. And Tier 4, defined as practices that demonstrate a rationale. Let's walk through each of these tiers to better understand this framework. Let's start with Tier 1, strong evidence. Strong evidence is the highest level of evidence available. To qualify as having strong evidence, the intervention must have at least 1 well-designed and well-implemented experimental study to support it. This means a randomized control experiment was conducted with a treatment group that received the intervention and a control or comparison group that did not receive the intervention. Participants are randomly assigned to these groups. The experiment must have a large and multi-site sample. The guidance from the U.S. Department of Education defines a large sample as consisting of 350 or more students or other single analysis units. Please note, if you have 2 or more studies that present the same level of evidence, you can add the number of study participants together. For example, if you have a study that has a sample size of 45 students that qualifies as strong evidence, and another study with a sample size of 305 students that qualifies as strong evidence, you can add those sample sizes together to reach 350 students. A multi-site sample consists of more than 1 site, whether that be a school, district, or state. The intervention must have shown a statistically significant and positive effect on the student or other relevant outcome. This means researchers found that the effects of the intervention were noteworthy and directly related to the intervention. The outcome was not the result of chance or any other input. It also means the intervention led to a favorable result, like increasing student achievement. There is also a need to ensure that the intervention being considered is relevant to your specific context. The experiment should have been conducted with a similar student population and in a similar setting to the one in which you are seeking to implement the intervention. This means considering your target student population, whether that be grade level, subgroup, English learners, or students with disabilities, and the setting in which you are operating, whether that be urban, suburban, or rural. By considering target population and setting in vetting interventions, schools and districts will be ensuring that the interventions they select will be the most effective for their particular students or other stakeholders. The next level of evidence is moderate evidence. To be considered moderate evidence, the intervention must have at least one well-designed and well-implemented quasi-experimental study to support it. This means a control experiment was conducted with a treatment group that received the intervention and a control or comparison group that did not receive the intervention. Participants are not randomly assigned to these groups. The quasi-experiment must have featured a large and multi-site sample, and the intervention must have shown a statistically significant and positive effect on the outcome. Here again, relevance is important to consider. The quasi-experiment should have been conducted with a similar student population or in a similar setting. The third tier of evidence is promising evidence. To qualify as having promising evidence, the intervention must have at least one well-designed and well-implemented correlational study to support it. This means a formal study, as opposed to an experiment, was conducted to determine if a relationship exists between an intervention and a given outcome. This is commonly done through data collection and analysis. Within the correlational study, the intervention must have shown a statistically significant and positive effect on the outcome. Please note, due to the design of a correlational study, the evidence produced is not as strong as evidence produced in an experiment. Let's quickly review the differences between strong, moderate, and promising evidence. Strong evidence must have a control experiment with random assignment, a large and multi-site sample, and should be conducted in a similar setting and with similar students. Moderate evidence also involves a control experiment but does not have random assignment. This is the key distinction between strong and moderate evidence. Studies that present moderate evidence must also engage a large and multi-site sample and should be conducted in a similar setting or with similar students. Promising evidence involves a correlational study, which is a different kind of study than an experiment. A correlational study is designed to determine whether an intervention that was implemented was correlated to a particular outcome through data collection and analysis. It does not have any of the controls involved in an experiment. What is common to all three levels is that they demonstrate a statistically significant and positive effect on the desired outcome. Something else to note is that when considering interventions supported by strong, moderate, or promising evidence, the corresponding studies should not be overridden or contradicted by other studies that present the same level of evidence. Tier 4 involves interventions that demonstrate a rationale. An intervention that demonstrates a rationale should have a clear and effective logic model or theory of action which explains how the intervention being implemented is likely to improve relevant outcomes, should be supported by research in the field, and should have an effort underway to study the effects of the intervention by the state educational agency, local educational agency, or research organization to inform stakeholders about its potential for impact. These are our 4 tiers of evidence. The difference between tiers 1 through 3 and tier 4 is that no formal evidence exists yet to prove that tier 4 interventions will be successful when implemented. That doesn't mean that they can't or won't be successful, just that they don't yet have the evidence that proves that they will be. Here are some additional resources. First, the U.S. Department of Education non-regulatory guidance, from which I sourced all of the material for this presentation, and the What Works Clearinghouse, operated by the Institute of Education Sciences and designed to provide practitioners with resources and interventions that meet a high bar of evidence. On What Works Clearinghouse, there are 2 levels of evidence. First, meet standards without reservations, which qualifies as strong evidence, and meet standards with reservations, which qualifies as strong or moderate evidence. There are many more tools and resources on the way, and we will continue to update this website with materials as they become available. Thank you for viewing this presentation. I hope you feel more comfortable with evidence-based interventions and the 4 tiers of evidence. If you have questions, please email us at essa@cde.ca.gov.